During the late 60s and early 70s, a serial killer called the Zodiac brought terror to California. It's one of the strangest cases in history, and the more I've looked at it, the stranger it gets. Why do so many people link seemingly random murders? Where is the proof that the taunting letters and cryptograms sent to local newspapers come from the killer? Why do police seem to be blocking proper re-examination of the case? In this video, I'm taking a new look at the evidence and finding it points to a different conclusion. There may never have even been a Zodiac killer.
I don't know. It doesn't matter. Does aspirin do you any good? No, doesn't do any good. Sam, that stuff never did me any good either when I had it. Sam, let me ask you a question. Did you attempt to call this program one other time when Mr. Belli was with us?
December the 20th, 1968 in Vallejo, California. 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and David Arthur Faraday, 17, are on their first date. It's the first time Betty Lou had ever been allowed on a date. Neither of them will return home. At around 11 p.m, a local resident discovers their bodies in a gravel lay-by where young couples often park up. Faraday has been shot once in the head, seemingly as he got out of the car. Betty Lou had apparently tried to run. Her body lies some 20 feet away, with 5 bullet wounds in her back. There is no sign of robbery or sexual assault, which, as we'll see later, could be very significant. 7 months later, just after midnight on July the 5th, 1969, Darlene Ferrin, aged 22, and 19-year-old Michael Mageau are also parked up in a car, just a few miles from the site of the previous murders. Without warning, a man approaches and fires 5 shots, before pumping a further 2 bullets into each victim. Once again, there's no evidence that robbery or sexual assault is a motive, as the attacker just drives off. Darlene is fatally wounded, but incredibly, Mageau survives and gives a description of the assailant. White, 5'8" to 5'9", late 20s to early 30s, stocky build, round face, and short, light brown curly hair. Some 45 minutes after the assault, Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Then, on July 31st, 3 letters arrive at the Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Chronicle, and San Francisco Examiner claiming to be from the killer. The letters give details of the 2 attacks and contain sections of a cipher that the writer claims will reveal his name if it can be cracked. Hoping to provoke the writer, detectives from the San Francisco Police Department pour scorn on the claims, asking for more evidence that he really is the murderer. And so a legend is born. A cool, calculating killer, targeting victims at random, then taunting the police with bizarre letters, threats, and cryptograms so complex that some are still not fully understood, even today. But, as we'll see, examining the evidence suggests that even at this early stage in the Zodiac case, a legend might be all it is. Now the killer had a name, the next murder suggested he'd gotten a costume too. Just under 3 months after Ferrin and Mageau were shot, another young couple are targeted. On September the 29th, Cecilia Ann Shepherd and Brian Calvin Hartnell, aged 22 and 20, are sitting beside Lake Berryessa, some 30 miles drive from Vallejo. In a truly horrific attack, they're approached by a man with a gun. He's wearing a hood bearing the already famous symbol that the writer of the letters and cryptograms has been using. After tying them up, seemingly to rob them, the man produces a knife and stabs Brian at least 6 times in the back and Cecilia 10 times in both the back and chest before calmly walking away. Once again, there is no sign of sexual assault. Soon after, Napa County Sheriff's Office receives a call claiming responsibility, but police are already on the scene. On Brian's car door, they find another message, seemingly from the killer. Though Cecilia Shepherd dies 2 days after the stabbing, Brian Hartnell survives and is able to give a comprehensive description of the attacker and its perpetrator. A man around 5'11" tall, weighing between 220 and 250 pounds. Only a couple of weeks later, on October the 11th, it's claimed that the Zodiac struck again, this time in San Francisco itself. 29-year-old cab driver Paul Stein is hailed at the corner of Mason and Geary. According to Stein's timesheet, the single male passenger wants a ride to Washington and Maple in Presidio Heights, but a block before reaching the destination, Paul Stein is shot in the head. Though no one sees the actual shooting, 3 young teens watch as a man calmly walks away. He apparently tries to wipe the cab down, but blood-stained fingerprints are later recovered. The witnesses describe a man 35 to 45 years old, 5'10", between 180 and 200 pounds, barrel-chested, with light-coloured, crew-cut hair, and wearing glasses. Between them, they helped produce the now famous artist's impression. So is this the Zodiac? The super criminal who'd now killed 6 people in cold blood and boasted to the police that soon 12 would die? Soon after, the police receive yet another letter claiming the killing and enclosing a piece of blood-stained shirt fabric. Horrified detectives realise it seems to match the one Paul Stein was wearing when he died. It was the letters and cryptograms that turned a series of everyday killings into a sensation, and may have also blinded the police to the true nature of the crimes. Strange maniacal outbursts that claimed some killings, denied other aspects of the case, and taunted the police for their stupidity in not being able to catch him. Above all, though, the letters seemed designed to get publicity. If the letters don't go on the front page, he says, he'll randomly kill 12 people. Over the course of some 21 letters spread across the next 5 years, the writer makes dozens of threats, from killing busloads of children to planting a bomb in San Francisco if people don't wear badges with his Zodiac symbol. He also gives information that proves he was the killer, such as the swatch of Stein's shirt and information only the killer could know. Many researchers treat them as gospel, an unnerving glimpse into the deranged mind of a murderer. But there is no definite proof that they came from the killer, or even from the same writer. The information that hadn't been released to the public wasn't very convincing either. Anyone who'd seen the crime scene, or spoken to someone who had, even overheard a couple of cops in a bar talking about the case, could have come up with it. Some elements had been made public, others almost certainly weren't true. The letters also vary wildly. Most have very poor grammar and spelling, but some are completely literate. One is even a plea for help. Proof of the killer's cunning, say some researchers, keeping the cops guessing by assuming different personas and changing his handwriting. Or then again, perhaps they just were from different people. Though some handwriting analysts think the handwriting does match, others say it doesn't. And crucially, most of the events the killer threatens in the letter don't come to pass. Despite widespread panic through the city, no school buses are ambushed, no bomb goes off. Letters boasting of more killings arrive, but gradually, once the media stops taking notice, they slowly tail off. Though right up until the 2000s, an occasional letter would still appear, and people would still try and link it to the Zodiac. The famous cryptograms have a mystique they don't really deserve, adding nothing to the case, being mostly just more taunts and boasts, though some did take decades to crack. The first was largely solved by local school teachers Donald and Betty Hayden within a few days of its publication. It gives a good flavour of the Zodiac's style. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of Slavs for my afterlife. Is this from a cunning murderer pretending to be mad? Is he truly insane? Or perhaps he's just copying someone else's ideas? Because 90 years before the Zodiac, another serial killer also sent taunting letters to the press and police. From hell. Saw. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman and preserved it for you. T'other piece I fried and ate, it was very nice. I may send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. This is one of the letters allegedly written by Jack the Ripper, who terrorised London in the 1880s. Like the Zodiac letters, some are badly spelt, some well-formed. Both sets of letters contain boasts about the killings, complaints about the publicity the killer is receiving, and taunts aimed at the police about how near they've been to catching him. The Zodiac's first letter began, "Dear Editor," the Ripper's "Dear Boss." The Zodiac talks about paradise, the Ripper about hell. The "From Hell" letter really did contain part of a human kidney as proof of his crimes, though it couldn't be conclusively linked to any of the victims. Just as one of the Zodiac's letters contained bloody pieces of a shirt that seems to match that worn by taxi driver Paul Stein, though again, that's not been conclusively proven. So, could it be that the letters weren't from the killer at all, but a hoaxer playing a twisted game, copying a script that he knew had caused panic nearly a century earlier? The Ripper letters have largely been dismissed as fakes, written by cranks, mischievous journalists trying to sell papers, or even disgruntled police officers. Is it possible something like that happened with the Zodiac letters? A journalist or cop would have details that the public didn't, perhaps even access to the evidence, so could easily come up with the proofs that the letters supposedly contained. And if the letters were fake, then were the killings actually linked at all? In serial killer cases, one of the most basic techniques is to look at the modus operandi, the way the killings are carried out. Overwhelmingly, the same methods will be used to target and kill victims every time, perhaps evolving slowly as the murderer becomes more skilled. Another telltale clue is the killer's signature. Ritualistic behaviour, posing of the bodies, the taking of trophies, all telltale hints that the same person is behind each case. And even in the 1960s forensic examination of bullets or shell cases, tyre tracks, fingerprints, and boot prints were also already routinely used to link cases. But one of the strangest aspects of the Zodiac case is that none of these techniques have managed to identify the killer. There is a lack of consistency in the killings and no definite evidence linking crimes at all, which is why, in most cases, the authorities didn't link them at first. Police in Vallejo initially treated the killings of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday as a drugs-related crime. The area where the pair were ambushed wasn't just frequented by young couples, it was also known for drug dealing. Faraday was rumoured to have had information about a local drugs gang. Instead of falling victim to a serial killer, was he silenced to stop him talking to the police? Or did the pair innocently stumble over something happening that night and pay with their lives? Drugs were also considered a factor in the attack on Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau. Darlene was a heavy user with a chaotic lifestyle. Though only 22, she was already twice married with plenty of other boyfriends, including at least one local cop. A lot of them have, at various times, found themselves suspects for the murders. As the police report shows, the motive for the attack was thought to be jealousy or revenge. Mageau also had a criminal record, and Darlene's sister was convinced he knew who the killer was. As I'll reveal later, Mike did finally put a name to the man who he thought shot them. Forensic examination also showed the weapon used in the two sets of murders wasn't the same one. In fact, the link between what are now viewed as the Zodiac's first two attacks was only made when the letters started arriving, claiming there was a link. And if he had carried out the first of those attacks, why would such a publicity-hungry killer not have started his letter-writing campaign to boast about the killings straight away, instead of waiting over 6 months until after the second attack? Why also are the final two confirmed cases, which happened after the Zodiac hit the headlines, so different, both from the first two and from each other? As far as we know, the weird Zodiac disguise was only used in the attack on Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, and that time his whole modus operandi was different, choosing victims not in a car, engaging in conversation with them, tying them up, and stabbing rather than shooting them. The physical description is also of a bigger, heavier man than described in the other killings. Before her death, Cecilia Shepard was able to add that the man had long brown hair falling over his forehead, visible through the eye holes in the hood. A man was seen following girls round the lake just hours before the attack. Though he matches the description given by Shepard and Hartnell, he's very different to the other descriptions or the artist's impression. So could this killer simply have been a copycat, inspired by the Zodiac letters to have a little fun of his own? The Paul Stine killing was completely different again, in a moving vehicle on a busy city street. Was the killer deliberately changing his look and method of killing each time to confuse the police or to get extra kicks? Or was it, as the police believed at first, not a Zodiac killing, but totally unrelated, a robbery gone wrong? Once again, the only link to the Zodiac case was a letter claiming it and containing a piece of blood-stained shirt. That's often taken as concrete proof that the person who killed Paul Stine must have sent the letters. But all it definitely proves is that someone found a bit of bloodied shirt somewhere. Witnesses described the killer wiping down the cab. So was a piece of Stine's shirt the rag he used and maybe left at the scene, inspiring someone else to do a bit of hoaxing with it? Partial fingerprints were found in the cab on the payphone used to claim the Lake Berryessa killings, and on some of the letters. But no matches have ever been made, either to a suspect or to each other. There's also no proof any of those fingerprints were from the killer anyway. Footprints may have matched boots owned by some of the suspects. Once again, though, that's not a cast-iron link. Was this more proof of the killer being ultra cunning, covering his tracks, leaving no clues to his identity? Possibly. Or it could just be that the killers were different people committing unconnected crimes, only linked by hoax letters. One of the strangest things of all about the Zodiac letters is the complete conviction among so many people, including, it seems, some police officers, that they must be genuine. So much so that unless a letter arrived claiming a killing, it wasn't regarded as being a Zodiac case, in public at least. On June 4th, 1963, Robert George Domingos, aged 18, and Linda Faye Edwards, 17, were tied up and executed on a secluded beach near Gaviota, California. In February 1970, John Hood and his fiancée Sandra Garcia were stabbed to death on a beach near Lompoc, some 30 miles from Gaviota. Other strangely similar double killings were recorded in the state right up until the 1990s. Many of these attacks were eerily similar to some of the alleged Zodiac killings, with no sign of sexual assault or robbery, but no link was made. Perhaps because no letter claimed the Zodiac was responsible. On the other hand, the 1966 killing of Cherry Jo Bates, which had few similarities to any of the others, was linked to the Zodiac for a long time, because letters had arrived claiming the killing, even though they were later proved to be a hoax. All of which leads to an horrific possibility. Perhaps a serial killer was preying on young couples in California. But because of hoax letters claiming some of them to be the work of a fictitious murderer, the police were running around in circles trying to connect the wrong killings, missing the actual murderer entirely. The investigation into the Zodiac case looked flawed from the start, with the mass of publicity about the killer's identity skewing the whole inquiry. According to veteran journalist Harry Phillips, who reported on the case, investigations always fell victim to the most basic mistakes an investigator can make, which is why they were looking at suspects and not the evidence. So, is it now too late to solve the mystery? Other cold cases have been cracked recently using modern DNA techniques, like the unmasking of the Golden Gate murderer Joseph DeAngelo. So even now, such examination might finally ID a killer or show there was no link between the crimes, as well as proving whether or not the letter writer and killer were one and the same. But when attempts were made by SFPD homicide detectives Kelly Carroll and Michael Maloney to do just that, it turned out the evidence itself was poorly catalogued and badly stored. Allegedly, some key items had even been taken home as souvenirs by retiring officers. Though a partial DNA profile was recovered from a stamp on one of the letters, just when it seemed to be getting somewhere, the investigation was shut down by their superior officer, Lieutenant John Hennessy. Was this, as he claimed, to save public money being wasted on a wild goose chase, or to hide further embarrassment about the mishandled original inquiry? More intriguingly still, maybe there is evidence that someone in the department was involved in the creation of the letters and cryptograms, and the case was canned to protect the guilty. Though only one person was ever publicly named as a suspect during the investigations, later researchers and private detectives have more than made up for that, with dozens of suggestions, but not a lot of evidence. Some seem to have been named just because they look like the artist's impression, and all have passionate supporters rooting for their killer, dismissing all rival claims with contempt. Andrew Todd Walker, otherwise known as William Joseph Grant, does look the part. Like many of the suspects, he was alleged to have had links to Darlene Ferrin, and best of all, had been trained as a cryptographer in the army. Perfect candidate for killer and letter writer. Richard Gaikowski could also be mistaken for the man in the wanted poster. As a journalist and radical activist, he might well have the means and motive to stir up a bit of a panic with fake letters about bombs on buses, but the flimsy evidence against him as the killer is from an anonymous informant, with no substantiation. In 2021, a private group of investigators led by Thomas Colbert came out with a flurry of claims that supposedly pinned the killings on this man, a former soldier named Gary Francis Post with a murky past. Though Colbert is still pushing the claims, they're dismissed as garbage by most other researchers, the police, and FBI. Ultimately, there is no real evidence against any of these suspects or the hundreds of others who've been mentioned, including, apparently, film star Clint Eastwood and the Manson family. Perhaps that's a story for another video. But what about the prime suspect, the only man officially named? Arthur Lee Allen was a former elementary school teacher who'd been sacked for molesting children and was living back with his parents in Vallejo at the time the Zodiac killings began. There is a lot of circumstantial evidence that could put him in the frame for a number of killings, including some of those not claimed by the writer of the letters, and most compellingly for the murder of Darlene Ferrin, as in 1992, Mike Mageau ID'd him as the man who'd attacked them. But when Allen's DNA was tested against the partial profile obtained by SFPD detectives Carroll and Maloney, it didn't match, suggesting, if nothing else, that Allen certainly wasn't the writer of all the letters. Worse, to quote Maloney, Allen's fingerprints didn't match, his handwriting didn't match, his appearance didn't match. On top of that, Allen was a convicted sex offender. None of the cases we've looked at seemed sexually motivated, a fact that counts against several supposed Zodiacs. And there the case rests, with no new leads and still no clear suspects, pretty much as it has for the last 50 years. With Allen, Post, Gaikowski, and most of the others now dead, unless there is a DNA breakthrough, the best anyone can say is that one or more of these men may have killed at least some of the victims or written some of the letters. But they're probably not the Zodiac the police have been hunting for over half a century. Because looking at the evidence, it seems very possible that no one is. Just as a Zodiac is made up of many signs, perhaps the Zodiac case is made up of many killers, linked only by imagination. Do you have a Zodiac killer theory? Let me know in the comments. Thomas Colbert also claims to have solved the D.B. Cooper case. To find out more about that mystery, along with my theory on what happened, check out this video. And if you're enjoying the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe to get notifications about the latest videos first. Thanks for watching.